Alright, what's up, y'all? I'm back. I apologize, you know what I'm saying? I ain't been up here about 2 days. You know what I'm saying? I ain't have my camera all weekend, but it's alright though. But I'm back. I'm reading for 15 minutes today to help improve my speaking. And we're on page 47 in the book, same book. And I'm finna start it. While there are some black men involved in religious or spiritual circles, a disproportionate number are ministers, lay assistants such as deacons, and spirited followers or of church leaders. A larger number of black men don't participate in church, and many believe that spirituality, or religious service are woman's domain. Churches are fulfilling for many, however, you don't have to attend church service to create meditative spiritual practices that enable you to relate more empathetically to people in your environment in a loving and aware manner. Let me begin by saying that every person has the right to identify with any religion or spiritual practice that applies to agnostics and aesthetics willing to explore new kinds of body-mind connections. The goal here is to provide you with the opportunity to look at the role of spirituality in your life more broadly, and there is not something that interests you at all. It's perfect valid to ignore this entry and move on. However, if there's some part of you that's curious about this area of your life, take a moment to sit with this ideal of trying something new. Many men are rooted in very practical things. For a lot of black men, this can make the world of spirituality feel elusive or untouchable. To illustrate this point, take a moment to reflect on how it feels when you are at or leaving a religious service. Do you feel a deep personal connection to the experience and what it means for your life, or do you often feel that it's more like a spiritual paint by numbers exercise during which you're just doing what you're supposed to do and hoping for the best? While many men are devout in some form of faith, many don't allow themselves to experience something that feels more abstract, something that moves beyond a specific doctrine and creates an internal experience that better connects them to the world around them. I got some candy. Not last week. Black men are some of the smoothest men on the planet. We can own that. We can own that and feel proud about that. But as a result, many people get entirely too comfortable with any black man they come across. They quickly adopt the language that they assume will be comfortable for all black men. As a person, you're entitled to have your own standards. You can set limits on how you want people to refer to you by how you respond or by not responding at all. You don't always have to answer when someone wants to call you something other than your name. This runs counter to a lot of indoctrinated messaging black men have received, that notion that you've got to go along to get along. This is still true in many respects, but it's also important to challenge the notion that you always have to shrink for the benefit of other people's comfort and ease. You know, there are always considerations you need to take when you setting boundaries with others, because as you do, you risk being perceived as overly aggressive. This is a burden that black men bear, and it's exhausting. It's okay to lay that burden down on some occasions. This isn't to say that no one can ever call you bro, bruh, or anything else, but you also don't have to accept dictates on how you should be addressed. You can determine how you want to be addressed and how you want to manage that. You get to set limits with the people around you, no matter the environment. For far too long, black men have been expected to succumb to norms that don't apply to others, that can range from accepting or rejecting the language people around us to border systems. forces that dictate how we're supposed to live our lives. But times are changing, and you are no longer required to tolerate someone's referring to you in a manner that makes you uncomfortable. You get to correct and redirect someone who refers to you by the wrong name or talks to you in a way that suggests they're overly familiar. This is about personal dignity. Dignity gives you the power to say no or ignore someone who refuses to acknowledge you in the way you have requested. You may have heard the term imposter syndrome floating around a lot. More these days, it refers to internalized feelings of fear, self-doubt, worries, and inferiority that lead to increased stress and performance issues. When you reach a higher level in your career, you might have experienced these feelings as you have tried to climb the company ladder. However, that doesn't mean you suffer from this syndrome. Those claiming black men disproportionately suffer from the syndrome ignored the role of race-based roadblocks in the workplace as the source of stress. The claim that black men are suffering from the syndrome is often leveled by a company's white managers who are extensions of the power that can be. In fact, in many cases, the people in charge have created work environments that make black men feel insecure and inferior. To put in plainly, corporatism and capitalism have pathologized employees' reactions to the prejudicial and often racist components of their system. In other words, they've turned the reality of institutional bias into an employee competency issue, particularly as it relates to assessments of black men. Black men, other people of color, women of all race and ethnic and queer folks have systematically been kept out of the upper echelon of the corporate structure throughout history. Bias in corporate recruitment and subjective employee evaluation practices have promoted marginalized people to understate their value and in some cases question their competency. This works most often to benefit the white upper class heterosexual men who own and wrote the societal book. This means that if you don't act right in those spaces, you will not progress in your career, and they will tell you it's because you just don't feel like corporate material. Feeling like an imposter in places that aren't supportive of you, success is not like a personal failure. It is a reasonable reaction to intentional exclusionary practices. You may have work you need to do to be successful in these environments. Many stay in these environments because there are no other comparable job opportunities. After all, you have to provide for yourself and your family. Understandably, you do everything you can to be successful. You also deserve to not feel unworthy and to stress yourself out internally when you realize that the problem are external. After Ahmaud Arbery was murdered in 2020, the simple anticipation of lacing up my shoes and leaving my house put me on the floor in tears. All too often, we see the lives of black men who look like us and our family members dying at our hands of police and bigoted vigilantes. How are you supposed to feel okay going out in the world when scrolling online leads you to yet another unjust killing, a new name, and another hashtag? It's important to acknowledge the negative impact this has on your mental health. You can take care of your mental health by creating space to understand and debrief after these kinds of events. Sometimes it feels like second nature to go numb and live in denial. It's painful and terrifying to realize that some people are willing to attack you because they fear and or hate you. They often feel that way because you are different in appearance. You are the other. You are the other. This is the burden of racism that has existed for centuries. The impact of this thinking throughout history has generated atrocities such as transatlantic slave trade, the Holocaust, and Jim Crow terror in the American South. Some like to believe this extremely thinking is buried in the past, yet these days you are faced with examples of racist violence in the modern day. Your morning news show covers the story Friends talks about in it online. A coworker may even want to check in about it at work. These losses are all around you, but often do you take a moment to honestly reflect on the toll it takes on your heart and spirit? You are stressed, but you try to move on without processing each event. Maybe because you believe there isn't enough time or energy to, or you don't consider it's a priority. Well, you must begin to take time to debrief. You can respond to such events by finding spaces online or in a community to discuss your thoughts and feelings, to reduce stress and build a social support network that will enable you to keep moving forward in life. Learn your toxic tricks. There is a lot of discussion about men and black masculinity. These days, definition of masculinity are changing rapidly. That often prompts black men to try to determine the coercive factors that make relationships and other people more difficult. Every person on this earth can act in toxic ways. No one is exempt, and for every person on this earth can act in toxic ways. No one is exempt, and for most of us, this toxicity is realized in everyday interactions. Being a responsible, accountable man also means giving yourself room to explore how you may have been toxic and then become better for the future. Black men are no exception to this kind of self-examination. As hard as it can be to hear, meaningful self-exploration and adjustment is necessary for sustainable, healthy relationships. Some examples have been toxic. Black men are no exception to this kind of self-examination. As hard as it can be to hear, meaningful self-exploration and adjustments are necessary, sustainable, healthy relationships. Some examples of toxic behavior may have shown up in your life in the following ways: thinking that you are right in every situation, shutting down when you want to avoid an emotional conversation, and dictating that others say or can do. Human beings are social creatures, and we all need to be mindful of our behavior if we want to satisfy our relationships and opportunities. To help define of masculinity that is more society friendly. That means doing the work to identify how your actions might be considered problematic or toxic. Toxicity can show up in your life in many ways, but it's important to remember that just because you do something toxic doesn't make you unworthy or a toxic person. It means that you have some work to do, as we all do. When faced with criticism about something you've frequently done or said, it's hard to not take it personally and become defensive. This is your psyche defending itself because the feedback doesn't match up to the picture you have of yourself. This is a normal human reaction. The reality is that we are not the best judges of our own character. We must move beyond that knee-jerk defensiveness to seriously consider the feedback we get from others. Sometimes while your intentions are not malicious, malicious, it is entirely possible to hurt those around you. Your intent doesn't absolve you from being held accountable for your actions. So create time and space for quiet reflection. In this space, try to reflect on your feedback you've received from people in your life until this point. So that's the time. It's currently 8:41, and we're stopping on page 57. And I'll be back with y'all. I'm Cinnamar. Thank you. If you took the time to watch this, I appreciate you. You know what I'm saying? For staying on the journey with me, you know what I'm saying? And that's it. I'm out.